Welcome to the Soul of Enterprise, Business and the Knowledge Economy, sponsored by Woodard, building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. I'm Ron Baker, along with my good friend and Verisage and Threshold colleague, Ed Kless. I got to start saying Threshold, Ed.
It's hard to break the habit. It's like when, we used to get changes to the opening, you get in a roll and you can't stop.
You do. Well, today, Ed, we're doing the Boardroom Brawl. Will purpose stand tall or will profit take all?
Thank you to ChatGPT for being so alliterative.
Yes, for sure. And thank you to the listener who asked a question, which we'll probably get to on the next segment. But Ed, I know you have something else for us to start with.
Yes, we have, for those of you who don't know, you can ask us questions and submit them through a website. So it's thesoulofenterprise.com/question. And you can record your question for us and we will play it back on the air. And we have such a question today, Ron. And this is one that we sort of have a little bit of experience with based on a former guest of the Soul of Enterprise who came, but we'll get to that. Let's get rolling on here. And here is the question.
Hi, Ron and Ed. My name is Melquia Smith, and I am a children's book illustrator. And Ron, I actually got into your world a few days ago through a Relay and Profit First webinar. And I started diving deep into value-based pricing and the subscription model and all of the things. And so I'm really curious, as I've been hearing so much information and so much just value, how CPAs and finance professionals are able to use these sorts of models for their business. I'm really curious, what are ways that a children's book illustrator can use this business model, either value-based pricing or subscription model pricing? Thank you both so much for your time, and I am so excited to be able to listen to your ideas. Hi, Ron and Ed.
Sorry, there you go. All right, Ron.
Wow. Well, thank you, Melquia. That's awesome. I'm actually intimidated, Ed, because children's books. Oh, geez. I just remember something William F. Buckley wrote once. He wrote one children's book, and I don't know, 50 others or 60 others, and he said the hardest book ever was the children's book.
Mm-hmm.
And and Rush Limbaugh he was a children's book author.
Mm-hmm.
He penned 5 or so before he passed away, and he said they were difficult. They're just hard to. So I'm just in awe of people that either write them or illustrate them. It's incredible. So Moquay, it's a great question. I do think there's value pricing opportunities for illustrators. I did a lot of work in the advertising space, and one of the things I learned was the photographers and illustrators that did things for advertising world were highly paid. I mean, everything was trademark, copyrighted, and you paid these people big money. Sometimes the photographers were making more than the ad agency.
Yeah.
To put it in perspective. So I do think there's ways to do it. I think there's ways that you could do, obviously, fixed price, and you could also probably take a percentage of the royalty. Maybe you do. I don't know if you've ever thought of that or have ever done that, but the idea here would be, you might lower your fixed price for a higher royalty percentage at the back end if you think the author's really sitting on a gold mine, with a best-selling book. You might want to share in some of that risk reward. Or you could just go all fixed price for maybe if it was a new publisher or a new author or something like that. But those are some of my thoughts, Ed. And also, I just learned just from looking at Rush's books, he had children characters, but he had a time-traveling horse, which was interesting. And he sold tons of stuffed animals around that.
Merch.
So what merch is available to you from that? And how do you share that with the author who developed the character, but maybe you came up with the illustration? I'm not sure of all the legal details on that, but those are some other ideas. And the other thing, Ed, was we interviewed Connor Boyack on the show with his Tuttle Twins series. And I know you've read some of those books. And that guy's
multiple
crazy.
times because I read them to my kids, and that's that's why children's books are so challenging, because they have to be not only entertaining to the kid, but entertaining enough to the adult to make sure that the adult is willing to keep reading them.
Yeah, exactly. And Connor has built an empire.
Oh yeah,
around the Tuttle twins, and I know I already emailed McQuee on that and said, listen to this show with Connor, and she did. So, but those were some of my initial thoughts, Ed.
Yeah, and I think all solid, Ron. I don't think there's going to be too much. I might just add that if you are doing a value priced engagement, you could, especially following the recommendation of offering 3 options, you may want to consider something like the highest price being absolutely no royalty, and then 2 below it where maybe you get 1% and then 2%, and then you could even have different percentages that you take. And by the way, the 1% and 2% are totally made up. I have absolutely no idea. It might be 10 and 20%. I have no clue as to what that might even be involved from an illustrator standpoint. But yes, certainly merchandise. The other thing too is if you are getting involved in an author that is doing a series such as Connor, and you know that that's going to be the case. Maybe you could offer a subscription and say that, hey, listen, I will be willing to do the illustrations for all of this books in this series over the course of whatever period of time that is, and then allow them to pay you on a subscription basis so that it's not hot and cold with them. So it's not like, okay, well, now I need illustrations for this book. They could just pay you over time. And then that would get your cash flow to be a little bit more regular for that period of time during which you're under contract, so to speak. And then there may even be a permanent contract if this author is that prolific and is wanting to do expand out and do some other things. So I think there are opportunities for both those, for certainly value pricing, and even perhaps subscription with the right author that you're working with.
And one other thing just popped into my head, Ed. Remember Brian Kaplan? He wrote a book on immigration, and he wrote a book on building, building more homes or whatever.
They're comic books. They're the graphic novel, I guess they called. Yeah,
and I could have sworn I heard him say his illustrator gets a good chunk of the royalties. Like they have a 40-60 split or something. I'm not sure, but if somebody's going to be able to do that, maybe you just team up with them, and maybe not half and half, but something like that as well.
Yeah. Lots of different possibilities on that. So, but I really appreciate the question, Melquia, and you it's really weird to think that somebody, Ron, is going down a rabbit hole of the soul of enterprise, but I really appreciate that, and I'm honored to hear that happens. So.
Right. Special editions too, by the way. I think. That's another signed by the illustrator and the author. I mean, that's kind of a big deal.
Who's big into that was the couple of bands have done that. 9 Inch Nails, for example, and Radiohead. The Radiohead is one we've talked about on the show previously, where they had the thing where if you had their new album only dropped and you could pay nothing for it. They would allow you to pay $0, but you actually had to go into the field and type 0.00.
Right.
In order to be, and then you could click download, right? But that would be an interesting thing too, to see if you could set up like I think Patreon, not GoFundMe does a lot of these things where you're allowed to pre-sell a certain number of, say, 100 signed copies, and they pay a higher rate where if they're funding. So that's really another way of thinking about it. That's really value priced, because you're getting the money a little bit ahead of time too.
Yeah. Like Disney, when you buy an animation cell from one of Disney's movies, and some of those go for big bucks. Just wow, so many different things to talk about there. But that's really neat. Thanks for that question.
All right, and before I play the next question, Ron, do you want to lead this off a little bit as to what we're going to be talking about? This is now the original title of the episode, so.
Yeah, we came up with this title, The Boardroom Brawl. Will purpose stand tall, or will profit take all? Because somebody sent in this question, and it's from Peter, and I think he's in Texas.
Yep.
And let's just play the question, because that'll give folks the context of what he's asking.
Hello, Ron and Ed. Greetings from Denton, Texas. Pete McCleskey here. I sure love your show. I benefit from it, and I thank you for putting it on. One thing you've been saying a lot lately is that profits are not the purpose of a business. They're the result, you say. This seems problematic to me. In fact, we have about a generation and a half or two generations of adults who have been relentlessly taught that capitalism is bad and profits are evil. It seems to me that the overriding purpose of any business is to make a profit. While I may have some other great thing I want to accomplish, the main purpose is to make money. And I don't think we need to be telling people that that's bad. Can you explain some more about what you really mean? Thanks, guys.
All right, Ron, just a minor little topic.
Yeah, just a little bit. We decided to dedicate a whole show to it, Peter.
Right.
So what a great question, and I'm so glad you brought it up because I absolutely, in the first part of his question, see where he's coming from, Ed. That we've taught a generation or probably more now that pursuit of profit is evil and blah blah blah. And Peter, we are the last guys that would ever say that profit was evil. In fact, my mentor George Gilder says profit is an index of your altruism. And that's a fascinating definition because altruism, Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, means other directed, right? Means outer directed to your customer. But that's just the point. Peter Drucker said the purpose of a business is to create a customer.
Create and keep.
Create and keep. And there's a lot of things businesses have to do before they make a profit. And that is how Ed and I define purpose. So I'm not sure if we're crossing the streams here with the definition of purpose. So why don't you talk about that one, Ed?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. I don't think we have a quibble at all with what Peter has to say with regard to the understanding of the content. This is purely based around our understanding and what we mean when we say purpose versus result and cause versus effect. So I think that is, and look, purpose and result. You could certainly see how a lot of people in everyday usage would use those two things as synonyms. Right?
It's really a purpose and a goal, isn't it, Ed? The way you break down goal and objectives, because it may or may not happen.
It may or may not happen.
Profit may, in fact, most of the time, profit doesn't happen.
The overwhelming majority of businesses in any given calendar year does not necessarily make a profit. And so therefore, if the purpose was a business only to make a profit, well, then there's a lot of people who are not obviously fulfilling their result, right? that purpose. Whereas, however, the focus on what is the external purpose outside, and I think that's really one of the key distinctions and delineations, is that purpose, in my mind, is, as you say, altruistic. It's other driven. It's focused on the outside. Is that create and keep a customer aspect of what Peter Drucker was talking about, right? But this is a giant can of worms that we have just opened. So we're going to take our break here so that we can really jump into it deeply. Want to remind you can get a hold of Ron or me by sending an email to asktsoe@verisage.com. The website is The Soul of Enterprise, where you can see show notes as well as previews to upcoming shows. A reminder about our Patreon channel, which is now available has been available at patreon.com/TSOE. There you can listen to the show commercial free, as well as any bonus episodes that Ron or I do. At a certain level, you can get a shout out like Blake Oliver did at Earmark CPE. Check him out at earmarkcpe.com. But right now, a word from our sponsors.
Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about the boardroom brawl. Will purpose stand tall or will profit take all? I didn't know this was a boxing match, but that's okay. Ed, the other thing about purpose, just to add to your definition, is, and this comes from a book, The Starting Point of Great Companies by Nikos, and he's got a last name I can't pronounce. It's Greek, it goes on and on. But he says, purpose is bigger than tactics. Purpose is bigger than strategy. It is a choice to pursue your destiny, the ultimate destination for yourself and the organization you lead. Purpose is your moral DNA. It's what you believe without having to think. I really kind of like that because obviously a company has to have a purpose, right? Cadillac, build great cars, Lexus, whatever, the ultimate driving machine. I mean, there's so much more that goes into a business before you get to that profit. And this is what Peter Drucker called the marketing concept. And if you think about it this way, I think it becomes a little bit clearer what our position is that the purpose of a business, of any organization, is to create results outside of itself. And so the result of a hospital is a cured patient. The result of a school is an educated child. The result of a church is a saved soul, right? Those, whether or not you're selling something or doing a not-for-profit service, the results outside of the organization are what count, not inside. Inside, all we have are costs and efforts and activities. In fact, Peter Drucker was the guy who coined the term profit center. And he did that around 1945, by the way. And he wrote years later, I'm ashamed of it, because inside a business, there are no profit centers. There's only cost centers and effort centers. The only profit is a customer's check that doesn't bounce. And when you think about it that way, you realize that profit is a result. It can't be the purpose of the business. The purpose of the business is to create the customer, keep the customer, and deliver constant value to the customer. So just wanted to clarify that too.
No, I think that's the case as well. And again, we're more focused on what the definition of purpose is versus any quibble what we have with Peter and what the concept is. I think when you look at it that way, and then you say, okay, if he's accepting now of our conversation with regard to purpose that it precedes profit, then profit, and this is where we loop in George Gilder, becomes the index of how well you are focused on that purpose. Because if everything else inside the business is just a cost center or efforts or wherever you want to call it, then what you have to look at is the differential between these two and say, okay, I am creating some kind of value externally to me. I am able to capture that through some percentage of that through my price. And since my price now is, I am able to justify my cost expenditure because my price is good, I then earn a profit. And then therefore my profit is now indicating as a governor, how well am I taking care of that external customer compared to with the resources I need to put in. And really, when where organizations are not able to do that, it's an indicator, hey, maybe you've got to change or go out of business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because value is subjective and customers can change their mind. And that can happen as fast as you can change your mind.
Well, and I want to loop something in, and our Greg Tirico, who does our social media and stuff, we've had this conversation, and I think this is directly on point with this, is we were talking about Southwest Airlines, right? And how has Southwest Airlines really lost its purpose, and if so, why and how? And Greg, when it went through, when we were talking about this, it was talking about the baggage, right? They're now charging for the bags, and bags don't fly free, even though at every airport that's one of the big, there's still big advertising as bags fly free. But Greg went and looked up their purpose. I mean, I'm sure it's on their website is where he pulled it off. And one of the things that is in their purpose statement is low cost, low price, right?
Yeah.
And that's no longer a differentiator because all of the other airlines have now also competed on price in the markets that Southwest serves.
Yeah, I think they've got a Starbucks problem, and it's only going to get worse if they change or do something.
Yeah, because they can't compete on price anymore per se.
Right.
And as evidenced by the fact that they are now charging for baggages.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that would be a direct violation of their purpose, which is to say we're going to compete on low cost.
And their competitive advantage.
And, right. Well, what
Yeah.
was their competitive advantage, which again no longer exists, not because of Spirit, but just because of dynamic pricing in the airlines. Like, I fly out of Dallas. I'm tied to American, and Southwest goes a lot of the same places. And every time I've checked, the Southwest price and the American price are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Right.
No, another way to think of the purpose profit thing is, profit is the oxygen for the body, but it's not the point of life. I know you always talk about the purpose of, is not to make what is it?
Red blood cells.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is from Conscious Capitalism, which is what we talked about with Kimberly last week. But I always thought that this is a really good analogy. I mean, and I don't know if this is directly from John Mackey or if he's quoting someone else, but I'll attribute it to him. And he says is that profit is like red blood cells in your body. One of the definitions of death is the inability of the body to produce red blood cells. Mm-hmm. But none of us wake up in the morning with the to-do list on the to-do list. You know what? So I'm going to produce me some red blood cells today, Ron. That's what I'm going to do. Right? They are the result of what we eat, what we do, the exercise we do, or in my case, don't get. So that they are the result. And if we don't do that, we die.
Right.
But no one's focused on it. We're focused on other things. So I like thinking of that purpose is like the red blood cells in your body. It's something that we don't necessarily think about on a regular basis, but is a necessary condition for continued survival. And of course, that leads back to another Drucker quote, which is that profits are the price we pay for tomorrow. So I'm sure you can riff on that too.
Right. And the other thing is, I think we also are defining profit a little bit broader than most people do. And to many people, they think only of their own profit, but business opportunity seldom knocks on the door of self-centered people. No one ever goes to a store merely to please the storekeeper. So when Ed and I are talking about profit, we're not only talking about the seller's profit, which of course is essential, that's the price you pay for tomorrow and all of that, but also the buyer's profit. The buyer has to buy something of greater value than the cash that they surrendered. And if they do that, well, then they earned a profit. Now, we as accountants, we get all hung up on the numbers, but the fact is, if you paid Starbucks $5 this morning for a latte, it was worth more to you than $5. And accountants get all, wrapped around the axle of, well, how much more? $5.10? I don't know. Could be $20 because you have to go to some boring CPE, and you really needed that shot of caffeine. The point is, there's that double thank you moment at the register. Both sides say thank you. You only do that if you both think you got more value than what you gave up. And hence, economists have always looked at the buyer's profit as well as the seller's. And I think that's another thing that really needs to be understood, because that brings us back into, you've got to create the value over and above your price.
Well, what Marx called it surplus value, right? He viewed that as the exploitation of the worker.
He did. So Ed, basically profit is a lagging indicator of what's in the hearts and minds of your customers. If you really think about it. It's a lagging indicator.
A lagging indicator of in the hearts and minds of your customers. I like that. Yeah.
Again, a lot more can be said about this, but just because we're often accused of being too theoretical, let me just point out what some actual entrepreneurs who made a ton of profit have said over the years. Business must be run at a profit, else it will die. But when anyone tries to run a business solely for profit, then also the business must die, for it no longer has a reason for existence. Henry Ford. Why are we here? I think many people assume, wrongly, that a company exists solely to make money. We have to go deeper and find the real reasons for our being. As we investigate this, we inevitably come to the conclusion that a group of people get together and exist as an institution that we call a company so that they are able to accomplish something collectively that they could not accomplish separately. They make a contribution to society, a phrase which sounds trite but is fundamental. David Packard, of Hewlett-Packard fame, there is only one boss, the customer, and he can fire everybody in the company from the chairman on down simply by spending his money somewhere else. Sam Walton. There is never a good sale for Neiman Marcus unless it's a good buy for the customer. Herbert Marcus, who was giving advice to his son Stanley Marcus in 1926. Those are four massive entrepreneurs who ran very successful and very profitable businesses, and all agreed, and I've got more quotes, that no, the focus can't just be on the profit. That's the result. We have to, we have to do R&D, we have to experiment, just look at any company that's out there making record profit like Apple, and how many experiments, or Amazon, how many experiments go wrong for them? That, like you say, they successfully crash.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I think an organization that is totally focused on the bottom line, as looking at what are we doing from a profit statement. So if its head is focused on the financial statement, it's got its ass toward the customer.
Yeah, and Ed, if you're only focused on profit, how are you going to inspire anybody to come work for you? It'd be like Martin Luther King on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I have quarterly objectives. It's just not going to inspire anybody.
I have a plan. I have a plan. Here's my 16-point plan. Let me take this out for you. Yeah, no, and I agree, and I think that is a good way. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit how this relates to a model that I've used for years. We've talked about it previous on the show, but it's been a while, and that is the 7S model, and why I think that's so important. But folks, we're up against our break. Want to remind our listeners you can get a hold of Ron or me by sending an email to asktsoe@verasage.com. The website is The Soul of Enterprise, with show notes as well as previews to upcoming shows. Love for you to get out there and rate this podcast. Do that at ratethispodcast.com/TSOE. Those of you on with us right now live, please do it now. Grab your phone, go out to ratethispodcast.com/TSOE, and we will love to get your review. But right now, a word from our sponsors. And we are back on the Soul of Enterprise. We are talking the purpose and versus profit, which is the primary thing that we want to do. And I think, we're coming heavily down on the purpose side, with the understanding that the result has to be the profit as well. But Ron, this relates to something that I really like to talk about, and that is the 7S model, which was first put forward by McKinsey and Company back in the 70s. It was embraced by Tom Peters and Bob Waterman in their seminal work. Really, I think one of the first best-selling business books. Would you say that would be probably the case? I mean, Drucker had stuff before that, but as in terms of a mass market trade,
it created the genre. Yeah,
the genre,
yeah,
right?
For sure.
In Search of Excellence. And on page 10 of that book, in fact, sometimes referred to as the page 10 model, is this thing called the 7S model, and I won't go through all of the S's, but there was a morphing of this model that was done by another McKinsey consultant that worked out of their Chicago office. And what he did is he pulled the center of the model out to the left. And instead of being, just one circle with all of the S's around the one thing, he said, no, there's an intention here to read this model from left to right, because there is a primary aspect of it. And he called that primary aspect, the first S is shared vision. And in shared vision was mission, vision, and values. Those were the things that compose this notion of shared vision. Now, interestingly enough, the only place that I've seen this attributed to is from the consultant out of the Chicago office who went on to found Great Plains Software, or he wasn't a founder. He was an early owner. And two-time governor of North Dakota, now Doug Burgum, who is now the Secretary of the Interior. So I'm very curious, and I would love that. Maybe we'll try to reach out to formerly Governor Doug, now Secretary Doug. I just can't get over calling him Secretary Doug. But to see if maybe that's something he's bringing to the Interior Department, right? Mm-hmm. Is he looking at it from a 7S model perspective? And I'd be real curious if that's something that he's brought back to bear, because it is a wonderful model. It's the best model. It's my go-to model. There may be others out there that really sums up the overarching view of a business. To me, it just does a great job with that. And that's how I tie it into this purpose versus profit, is to say, hey, shared vision is the thing that we've got to get right first. That even precedes strategy. Strategy precedes the people that we have inside the organization, and then on all of the rest of the stuff. So
right. And just another way of saying, right, or thinking about how much has to be done to lead to profit, to get a customer, to keep producing that value sustainably through time. Mm-hmm. When you got competition and market forces and regulatory changes and all this other stuff going on. Another definition I love, Ed, was from a United States Representative Samuel Barrett Pentongill. I'm not sure what state he was from, but he said this: the successful producer of an article sells it for more than it costs him to make, and that's his profit. But the customer buys it only because it's worth more to her than she pays for it, and that's her profit. No one can long make a profit producing anything unless the customer makes a profit using it. Just another way of saying the customer has to make a profit too. Mm-hmm. And we need to focus on that first to make sure that the profit is the result. And then Stanley Marcus said this: you're not really in business to make a profit, but you're in business to render a service that is so good, people are willing to pay a profit in recognition of what you're doing for them. And you can see why all of these entrepreneurs started to say, no, the function is not just to make a profit. There's got to be a purpose bigger than that.
What was it? The dollars are certificates of appreciation. Is that Rabbi Lappin?
No, it's Walter Williams.
Walter Williams. Okay.
Walter Williams. Yeah.
Right.
Every time you just think of dollars as little applauses, from your customer, and it's so true. Right. When you think of that, you and this is where I think accountants fall down. Mm-hmm. We talk about profit. We only think of the seller. We never talk about the buyer. And of course, this leads, Ed, to the whole thing that debits in the real world, debits don't equal credits, right? Because both sides profit, but that profit that the buyer makes is not recorded anywhere.
Right.
Because
Right. And
in accounting and in our national accounting, meaning GDP, we're only recording transactions at the agreed upon price. GDP is silent with respect to customer profit.
that's right. That's right. And it has, and we've talked about this. I think this is a great example, but how much would you have to pay to not be able to use your iPhone ever again? Now, there's a flip answer to that, which is thank God. Like I would never, but I mean, if you really think about it, if what iPhone or whatever, your mobile phone, right? I'm an Apple guy, so I'm gonna go. But so what would you have to? I'm constantly using it. Like you'd have to pay me a lot of money to say nope, I won't use this ever again. Nope, take it away from me. And
Yeah,
I mean, it's retirement level money if you think about it.
and it is. It's a retirement number for sure. I've asked the question in front of audiences, and they all kind of chuckle, but they know you know nobody would pay me that amount. You know, it would just it'd be too big of a sacrifice. Which gets back to the economist William Nordhaus, who tried to measure the buyer's profit, and said basically, if you look at these entrepreneurs like Henry Ford, like David Packard, Hewlett Packard, and Steve Jobs,
Bezos
and Gates, and all, they get about 2%. They capture about 2%, which means that 98% is going to the customer. Which leads me to believe, Ed, that Apple is not a skim pricer; they're a penetration pricer.
Yeah.
If you look at
by
that definition, right, by the value that you're getting from Apple. So it's a very interesting thing. And then, of course, I want to talk about the Johnson & Johnson credo, which the founder of Johnson & Johnson, R.W. Johnson, he wrote in 1943. It's carved in stone in the company's New Brunswick, New Jersey headquarters, and you can actually get a picture of it online. It's really cool how they carved it in stone. But the credo lays out 5 responsibilities, and I find this fascinating. They said, our first responsibility is to the doctors, nurses, hospitals, mothers, and all others who use our products, so the customers. Our second responsibility is to the people who work with us in the factories, the men and women we employ. Our third responsibility is to our management, our executive team, and all of that. Our fourth responsibility is to the communities in which we live. We have to make sure we're good citizens, we support good works and charity, and we pay our fair share of taxes. Our fifth and last responsibility is to our stockholders. Reserves must be created, research must be carried on, new plants must be built, new products launched, new sales plans, we must experiment with new ideas. When these things have been done, the stockholders should receive a fair return. We are determined, with the help of God's grace, to fulfill these obligations to the best of our ability. And now, this credo was somehow put in front of Milton Friedman. And they said, look, you say the only responsibility of a business is to increase its profits. What do you say to this? The shareholders come last. And he said, no, they don't. He said, this is just another way of saying what I'm saying. You've got to do all these things. Of course, we have to take care of our customers. Of course, we have to take care of the people who work for us. Of course, we have to be good citizens. We're talking about profit in an ethical, legal manner. After all, Ed, if we just wanted to make profit, let's start a meth lab.
Well, we're going to go full on Walter White. We're gonna go Breaking Bad. Are you Walter or Jesse in this arrangement, Ron? I don't know.
I don't care, because it's a heck of a lot easier than what we're doing. But yeah, the profit is the result of taking care of all of those stakeholders, and there's trade-offs to be made. Of course, the customers want lower prices, the employees want higher wages. How do you make those trade-offs? The profit and loss system, the price system makes those trade-offs. And the profit is the discipline. I forget who said it, but who said that capitalism is a profit and loss system? That was Milton Friedman. He said, and both are critical because they both send signals about how resources should be allocated. But capitalism without loss would be like religion without a hell.
Yeah, it's got to be allowed to happen, which is why we're so adamant about not messing around with the price system in any capacity, because it creates more noise for that signal. That's the problem with tariffs. That's the problem with
Minimum
laws,
wage,
minimum wage,
subsidies, rent control. You go down a long list. Yeah.
All of those things are disturbing that signal that price is.
And profit is a major signal when it comes to allocating resources. Thomas Sowell loves to say, look, profit's about, I don't know, 10% of national income, yet it allocates the other 90%.
That is such a profound, statement.
It's an incredible insight. And by the way, if a company does nothing but make a loss, well, then it's wasting society's resources. The question becomes, how long can the investors hang on? And when you look at companies like Tesla or Uber or Amazon, they hung on for quite a long time before I'm not even sure Uber's ever really turned a profit for a whole year. But it's a real interesting signal out there. Profit.
Right, and it should be those investors that decide, not some government that says this company is too big to fail. We got to prop them up. We got to bail them out. We got to do all of these things. Because we were equally adamant about the fact that we shouldn't be bailing out banks back in 2008.
Right.
It just does not make any sense for governments to pick those winners and losers, or subsidize even the losers.
And one more thing, Ed, just because we brought up the J&J credo, this needs to be said too. When Tylenol, which is a J&J product, had their, the tampering and with the cyanide, and somebody died in Chicago, and I think it happened in Atlanta. It happened twice, Tylenol poisonings, in 82 and 86. It cost the company $140 million in extraordinary write-offs, meaning, unusual, probably not going to recur. And, they handled it by looking at this credo. Their first responsibility was to their customers. They withdrew every bottle off the shelf across the entire country, even though there was no evidence that any other bottle had been tampered with outside of Chicago. And I think it was Atlanta. I can't remember, but they did the right thing, and they did it for the right reasons. They jumped ahead, and everybody said that brand's dead. They're going to have to rebrand it. Tylenol barely lost a blip because they came right out there. We're fully transparent. The CEO apologized. He said, we're pulling every bottle. We're retooling our manufacturing plants to put, the better seals on the bottles and all of that. The brand didn't lose a blip of market share, which is incredible. You would think that would take out any brand, like an airplane crashing for an airline.
Yep. Well done. It's still the textbook, and it's amazing to me how many people, despite that example, do not follow it.
Yes, agreed. All right. Well, Ed, unfortunately, we're up against our next break, and folks, I'd like to remind you, if you want to contact me or Ed, send us an email to asktsoe@verisage.com. And do check out our Patreon channel. As Ed mentioned, you can do that at patreon.com/TSOE. And now a word from our sponsors and Woodard. Well, welcome back, everybody. We're talking about purpose and profit. And Ed, there was just one more thing I wanted to bring up, and this comes out of Michael Novak's book. And I just love Michael Novak. He wrote a book called Business as a Calling, and he makes the argument in that book that a business, in its essence, is a moral institution because it requires moral conduct to succeed in the long run. I mean, we joke about a meth lab, but it's probably not going to last as long as Procter and Gamble, right? And he laid out 7 internal responsibilities, and these would be responsibilities internally of a business. And then he laid out 7 external. And of course, when you have requirements coming from the outside world, that would be like an ethical conduct or a moral code, right? Because it's external to you.
Right.
But his 7 internal responsibilities, and I'll just go through them, they're so self-evident. 1 is to satisfy customers with goods and services of real value. And that's not easy. I mean, that's hard in and of itself, just to keep continuing to make products and services or offerings that customers find valuable and are willing to pay a profit. The second is to make a reasonable return on the funds entrusted to the business by its investors. And Novak asks a beautiful question. Is it moral to lose other people's money? And we did a whole show on this.
Yeah.
And Peter, just so you know, the show that we did on this was stakeholder capitalism, the wisdom and wonders of shareholder capitalism, which we compared to stakeholder capitalism, which we're not fans of at all. And that's show number 488. So you can take a listen to that. And then the third internal responsibility was to create new wealth. And only businesses create wealth. I don't know if government can't do it, NGOs can't do it, not-for-profits can't do it. To create new jobs, same thing. Only businesses create new jobs, and to defeat envy, because they generate upward mobility. So they tamp down the envy, the green envy monster. Number 6 is to promote invention and ingenuity, which we give protection to in the Constitution with trademark property and all that, and to diversify the interests of the republic. It's crucial to preventing the tyranny of the majority. Novak loved the fact that road builders and airlines have different interests, and let them battle it out in the marketplace. So, but again, you're putting the customer first in these 7 internal responsibilities. So it just kind of backs up everything else that we've been saying here. But it's a great book. And then I'll just leave on this because I just think this is so good, and I can't find it. Where did I go? And again, this is Michael Novak, and it's from Business as a Calling. Life is not worth living if we exercise our profession only for the sake of material success, and do not find in our calling an inner necessity and a meaning which transcends the mere earning of money, a meaning which gives our life dignity and strength. I love that. Not to say
Fantastic.
profit's bad. And Peter, I totally agree with you. We have taught generations of kids that profit is a dirty word, and I resent that.
Yeah, look, I got a story about that, Ron. And this is I was doing a program up in Canada, and I think one of the exercises we did was the trading game, which we've done a show on as well, way back, lessons from the trading game. And it was a woman came up to me after this and said, "I'm so glad that I learned this lesson today." She said, because my mother always told me that money was the root of all evil. And I said, "Well, I hate to tell you this, but your mother was misquoting scripture, or at least selectively quoting, right? It's love of money is the root of all evil, not money itself, because money is just a medium. And you got to consider in the ancient world what money was material things. It was gold, silver. It was coinage. It wasn't Federal Reserve notes like we have today, right? So it was materialism. So it was really the materialist fallacy, saying that you're putting things before people. Right. And this is, this is why people before things is the point here. And purpose has to do with the people that you serve.
Right.
As a result of that, you may get material things, but your purpose, and then another way of thinking of this is that the purpose is people driven. The result may be material driven.
Right.
So,
yeah. So, Peter, we hope that helps. At least clarify
or maybe you're just
our
more
position.
confused. It's very possible that you're more.
I hope not. But if so, let us know. You can drop us another email, or you can leave us another comment. We'd love to hear your feedback on this show. And I've had this email that I got from Marie. I'm not going to say her last name because she didn't give me permission, or I never asked her for permission. But she said, "Dear Mr. Baker," that always, yeah, because it's like, no, my dad is Mr. Baker. I'm just Ron, please. She said, "I hope this note finds you well. I wanted to take a moment to express my deep gratitude for the invaluable insights and knowledge I've gained from your books and YouTube programs on value-based and subscription pricing. I'm currently reading Time's Up, and though I'm not yet finished, I've already been able to apply many of its teachings to my business. The clarity and guidance your work has provided me with has been instrumental in transforming my business model. In fact, I'm in the midst of working with a client to beta test subscription pricing, largely due to the inspiration I've drawn from your content. Sometimes the true impact of one's work may not always be immediately evident or openly recognized. I wanted to ensure you know that your dedication to the subject has made a significant difference in my professional journey. Your ability to distill complex concepts into actionable strategies is a true gift, and I'm deeply appreciative. Thank you, Mr. Baker, for the clarity, guidance, and inspiration. Your work has not only broadened my understanding, but has empowered me to take bold steps forward in my business." And then she says, "Oh, P.S. I'm just now listening to your podcast. You and your partner are truly engaging. Thank you."
Well, there you go. And thank you for that, Marie. And we let people know. We haven't talked about it all that much, Ron, but contact us. We're our new entity, Threshold. You can be available at thresholdnow.com. We have to put together a commercial for that. We really do.
Yes, we do.
Thresholdnow.com and /join if you want to jump in at the free level. One of the things you get there is the audio chapter summaries of Ron's book. But anyone out there who wants to work more directly with us, we are now open to that. So take a look at thresholdnow.com/join and let's have a conversation. This has been fun, Ron. This is a fun show. I really want to thank Peter again for his great question, for spurring this, and for the inspiration to say, yeah, this is something we should do a deeper dive on, because it's an important aspect. And it's amazing to me how few people cannot wrap their mind around it, especially that example you gave from William Nordhaus. I have used that argument multiple times, and I can tell you that no one comes back at that argument. They just go back to their repeating their own mantras. No one has ever even attempted to refute it.
Yep.
They'll just repeat something they say earlier. They're just like
and when you ask them, how much would I have to pay you to give up your iPhone for the rest of your life, then it might hit home, but maybe not even then.
Well, because a lot of people are like, oh, you'll pay me to take it away from me now. I never want to see it again. Oh, really? I mean,
yeah,
that's
like,
the snide thing. But
like people that say, oh, the dollar's only worth 10 cents. Well, good. I'll give you 10 cents on the dollar for everything in your portfolio.
Sure. Send it to me right now, right here, right now. Let's get it done. All right, Ron, what we got next week?
Next week, Ed, we're going to have back author Gail Pooley
of
our book of, what was it, 2022 or 3? I can't remember. Superabundance, which was our book of the year, but Gail Pooley wrote that book along with Marion Tupy, and he's coming back for the second time. So
yeah.
Or is it
so if you have any questions on that, I think it's the third time. Well, we've had Marion and we've had Gail. So, but we're looking forward to that. It's the second interview with Gail Pooley. But please, if you've got questions about this or pushback on it, go out to thesoulofenterprise.com/question and leave a question, and we will happily play that for Gail next week. See you in 167 hours, Ron.
This has been The Soul of Enterprise, Business in the Knowledge Economy, sponsored by Woodard, building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. Join us next week, folks, on Friday at noon Pacific time. In the meantime, check us out at thesoulofenterprise.com. You can find full show notes and information on upcoming shows. You can also contact Ed or me at asktsoe@verasage.com. Thanks for listening, folks. Have a great weekend.